Howdy folks, and welcome back to the Sunshine State Rails. I'm making this video now after the day is over since I neglected to do it at any other point during the day. But today we would be focusing on a unit train combination down the S line following a B63109 from about Bushnell, Florida into Tampa. Now B631, you might be asking, that sounds a little weird for our territory. Not anymore, it's not. And I'll talk more about the specifics of this guy once the video starts here, but something I'm going to comment on now is that CSX is undergoing a lot of symbol changes for just about everything on their system, with this train being an example of that, as this train would have originally been a K433, I believe. It's an ethanol train from Chicago to Tampa, but now they've switched it to a B631, with all of their K symbols switching to B symbols, with B standing for bulk, as in bulk commodity unit trains, that sort of thing. And another example of something that we might be seeing within the next few months or so is them switching manifest train symbols from Q to M and F for manifest and freight. I think part of the reason I also neglected to make this video at the beginning was because we had about a minute and a half to spare at our first spot here just north of Bushnell. So we're gonna jump right in here. B63109, let's get to it. After making the 2-hour drive to Bushnell for this train, like I said, we'd have about 2 minutes of downtime before we'd be back on the road following the train south. But in that 2 minutes, we'd watch half of his train go by, and half of it would be all of the ethanol consist. It's just after 10 o'clock a.m. and B631 is thundering towards downtown Bushnell with 97 cars loaded down heavy with corn ethanol. This ethanol is on its way to the gasoline terminals in Tampa to be mixed with gasoline, and with the prices of said substance rising as quickly as they are in the United States right now, B631 is hauling what could arguably be one of the most valuable commodities in the US right now. And midway in the train comes today's surprise. 2 mid-train distributed engines separating our ethanol train from another unit train, this one of jumbo covered hoppers. This is the result of our unit train combination. Somewhere along this newly created B631's journey down from Chicago, the decision was made to combine the train with an empty phosphate train headed back towards the Bone Valley at Winston. And the result is this 11,000 foot long double unit train, half tankers, half covered hoppers. As we roll alongside the train towards Bushnell, let's take a look at the train's setup. We're currently beginning to overtake the bottom half of the train, which is now the empty jumbo covered hopper portion. And his double mid-train DPU is the result of the solo leader on the phosphate train and the end train DPU for the ethanol train. By simply attaching the phosphate train to the bottom of the ethanol train as is, the result is now this double mid-train DPU set. US 301 south of Bushnell would provide us with plenty of pacing opportunities, not so much for the lead engines, but rather for the tank cars that were behind them. Try it as we may, it was a Thursday morning on a main country road through Florida. Utility vehicles, speed restrictions, and semi-trucks would prevent us from getting up to the front. So I guess admire the tank cars a little more. One of our most valuable assets is in there, you know. The train would, however, slow down quite a bit, which would allow us to get ahead of it by the time we reached the south end of Lakuchi siding. I'm not sure why they slowed down as much as they did here, but we needed it, so no complaints here. We're currently on the southern end of the CSX Wildwood subdivision, and Lakuchi siding is reported to be the shortest siding on the entirety of the subdivision, at no longer than a reported 7,423 feet. The head-end power for B631 would include of a BNSF SD70 ACE and a BNSF C44-9W, still wearing BNSF's iconic Heritage 1 paint scheme. For reference, the SD70 ACEs at the front and middle of this train are wearing the Heritage 3 paint scheme. All the way down to the corner way off in the distance is Lakuchi siding. It looks quite long, and don't get me wrong, 7,400 feet is a good distance, well over a mile, but to put things into perspective, this train is almost double the length of this siding, with the ethanol alone equating to almost 6,000 feet of train, with the phosphate portion adding another good 5K, equating to the 11,000 feet of double unit train rolling down the S-line. Choosing the morning sunny side of the tracks meant that I would have to wait for the entire train to clear before I could get out and back on the road again. But it looked like his cruising speed would treat us pretty well in that regard, so I wasn't all that concerned as the mid-train DPUs roll past us at South End Lakuchi. Oddly enough, the train is still down to almost a crawl as we roll into Dade City. As 631 glides through the Richland crossovers, you may note that he's on track 2 instead of the main track 1. I noticed they threw him over on this track at Ellerslie, and then seeing the signals at Richland, I moved down to Stewart Road after Richland, anticipating a stop from 631. Now at Stewart Road, looking south of the signals for Vitus Junction, I'll put it this way. This limited clear on the right is not for B631. This stop signal is. The crew of 631 would pull the train right up to Stewart Road and stop. I anticipated that this would be to let another train overtake him as per the signals, and while that would end up being true, it was also for a crew change, as about 20 minutes later a crew van pulls up, bringing a new crew on scene. However, no sooner than the crew van gets across the tracks do the gates start coming down for this other train, and he was on top of us before we knew it. This would be Q441-16, a nightly mixed freight train out of Waycross, Georgia down to Tampa, Florida, unaffected by our symbol changes just yet, but highly affected by crew shortages and yard work. Due to unavailable crews and working the infamous North Florida yard known as Baldwin, yesterday's Q441 is making it down here to Richland just after noon, with empty Tropicana reefers, covered hoppers, boxcars, lumber, tank cars, and even a fair-sized cut of gondolas, followed by the all-too-familiar auto-rack cut. And Tampa, clearly, has never had a shortage of automobiles to sell, because 441 always seems to have a decent number of these. .441 then makes the right turn at Vitus Junction to continue down the Wildwood subdivision, enter the Yeoman subdivision, and run the S-line into Tampa. And B631 would be soon to follow, with their new crew exchanging places with the old one from Waycross. They've been on this train since about 2 o'clock this morning, so now at just after noon, it's time to swap places and have a new team take over.
B631, over.
Yes, sir. Vitus Junction, ready to head tonight. Drop half our train off and then head beyond.
You got a 15, 529 tons, the length 11, 675, axle 764, 191 cars. Understand correctly, you have to set part of it off at night. Rest of Tampa, is that right? Yeah, we need to set the bottom portion off at night. Okay. I'll get with JF and see what they can handle you. Over.
Around the curves of Chancey Road we'd spin, and around the right curve of Vitus Junction 631 would turn, through Zephyr Hills and southbound onto the Yeoman subdivision. Thanks to the train's slow speed, I got to try out another spot that I've been anticipating, the Blackwater Creek Bridge just north of Knights. Just before 2 p.m. and B631 is pulling into Knight's siding to drop off the bottom cut of their train. Knight's siding, as compared to Lacucci's siding from earlier, is much longer, and if I remember correctly, Knight's is just over 11,000 feet in length, so the entirety of this combined train could potentially fit in here, but they're only dropping half of it. Knight's siding has really caught my attention over the past few outings we've had, as if you look down to the right of the tracks, all of the brush that was in that ditch there, somebody at some time came in and cut it all out, making this area a lot more appealing for train viewing. Not sure if that was the reason for it. I actually highly doubt that it was, but it's convenient, so we'll take it. The train was likely coming to a stop here to let the conductor onto the ground at the south end of the siding, but it's convenient where the train did stop, as it shows us pretty much exactly where they were going to make the cut down at the south end. Although this 9365 was the end train DPU for the ethanol cut originally, they were going to leave it and the 3005 and the phosphate hoppers in Knight's siding, meaning that both engines and the phosphate hoppers would end up in Winston Yard over near Lakeland eventually.
It'll be about 50 more if it's 105. 97.
Something else to recall from this is the instances around this time last year and further on when nights would be filled with these phosphate hoppers, and we would complain about them because they get in the way of our shots and such. For those of you who would have ever asked how or why those hoppers got there, this is usually how that happens.
That's good when you stop.
Combinations with other unit trains like this one warrant the set-off of these cars in nights, although with those older instances, there isn't a crew ready within a day to take the cars to Winston, so they sit here for up to 2 months. That wouldn't be the case with these though. They'd be on the move out of the siding within the next day. And some interesting cargo in that trailer of his. Moving down to the Candace Road crossing at the south end of Knights, we can now see the locomotives and phosphate cut off in the siding as B631 separates their ethanol cut from the rest. They would then pull the entire train out of the siding onto the main, then shove the entire thing back on the main to save the conductor a walk back to the lead engines. By shoving the entire thing back onto the main down here, it essentially moves the head end down to where the conductor is. Occupying the two tracks at Knights currently now is that empty phosphate train and that loaded ethanol train. And you may also recall that this scene looks eerily familiar to the unit train fiasco of last April, but this situation is fully under control, or at least somewhat sensibly this time. With the conductor back on board, B631 would take their clear signal at Knights and make the final run to Yeoman Yard. A little interesting point about that trailing 1097, although it wears the Heritage 1 paint scheme, its battery box is still in war bonnet colors. My only guess to this is that it either got replaced with one of these, or its battery box just didn't get painted with the rest. But a little hidden gem, I guess you could call it. And our next setup location would be arguably one of the most popular along this train's route, the Plant City train viewing platform. I hadn't shot a train here in a little while, so I figured I'd give it a shot, and I was surprised just how little people were here today. B631, the first ethanol train to run through here under their new symbols, and now only hauling a fraction of what we saw it with at Bushnell this morning, clears Plant City just shy of 4 p.m. So the last spot that we could shoot it at today would be 78th Street. But for some rhyme or reason, the train would sit up at the signals of YN for 2.5 hours. Not sure why that had to happen, but it did. So we'd see the yard switcher with 8214 working around during that time. We'd even see Q442's power roll up out of the yard before anything happened. But not too long after, at 6:30 p.m., B631, now almost in golden light, notches out of the signals of YN and into Yeoman Yard to end off the day. And we're back here again. Yay. That would just about do it for the day. It was just after 6:30 in the evening at that point, and it was our time to get started back toward home, so that was that. And I must say though, it was a very interesting day out there, and I'm glad I took the opportunity documenting a new symbol as well as a practice that I haven't seen before, them dropping off that phosphate down there at night, so that was pretty cool to see. But in any case, that would conclude our outing to Central Florida for the day. So until next time, whatever we find ourselves out for, I suppose I'll see you then on the Sunshine State Rails.